Good to see you all this morning. I hope we can have a great evening tonight. I'm already looking forward to that, even as I get ready to preach the sermon here. Never been a part of Youth Unite, so I'm looking forward to that. And this morning I would like for us to look forward to a lesson which is a little bit different direction than what you've seen me approach with you before. I've preached already here some lessons at Willette concerning informative things, especially in Bible class. And then most of my preaching has actually been what you might call exhortation from the Bible reading we just had. However, I have not been doing a whole lot in the nature of reproof or convincing, you might say, causing people to come to conviction of various things. And I haven't had any really on rebuke as of yet. After all, I'm just starting. What would I know to rebuke? And so we want to make sure that we have a balance in Bible teaching. This morning is a little bit on the way of reproof. That is, to get people to identify where they may be in life and how they might be able to improve, because you don't want to be caught being a part of the Tator family. Now you say, Tim, you're getting awful personal if you're going to talk about a certain family this morning. I'm afraid we have to. You see, sometimes in the Bible, names were called, were they not? I know they were, brethren. Think about it. There were many religious groups in Jesus' day. There were the Essenes. There were the Zealots. There were various political and social groups, but Jesus singled out two of them, especially called them by name and rebuked them, the scribes and the Pharisees. Did He not? I know He did. There were certain individuals that the Bible specifically would mention. Alexander the coppersmith hath done me much evil, the Apostle Paul pointed out. There were different individuals down in history that will go down notorious for being bad, Jannes and Jambres among them, and the Bible is replete with the calling of names. Sometimes it is necessary. We do not want to be in fellowship with or to be like the people in the Tator family. Tator, T-A-T-O-R. I want to be specific as to who I'm fussing at. Now, if you're not in the Tator family, that's good. If you are, then you may not have a whole lot of problems, but rest be assured you got some kind of problem. Because every single person in the Tator family needs to be reproved and sometimes needs to be rebuked for exactly what they are and what they need to be. The first person that I would like to give reproof to this morning is those who may be like, or those who may know and associate with, and those who have followed in the footsteps of old Spectator. Spec. Y'all following with me now? Just put Tator on the end of it, and you'll have every single one of these guys. Spectator. Now, if you all haven't figured out yet, you probably know what Spectator is all about. Spectator does not really participate. Spectator just kind of looks at it. He sees what needs to be done, but he's not necessarily a part of it. I related to some of you all in a Bible class, and I'll relate another story to you now about people that are kin to old Spec. There was a man that I know, is a good friend of mine, over in the Tompkinsville area, Greg Tribble. Some of y'all might be aware of Yoakley Tribble Funeral Home up there in the Tompkinsville area. It's a very nice funeral home. Greg doesn't believe like I believe, but he's a very nice man, very gentlemanly fellow, and he and I talk on just various occasions whenever I have a funeral to do up that way. Well, Greg was talking to me about how he was going through town one day. He said, I was driving along and there was a lady that has one leg gone, and she is known to go through town on her motorized wheelchair. And this lady has been that way for some time, and she has become rather heavy-set in her wheelchair. She had had an accident there at the side of the road, and she had fallen out of her wheelchair. She needed, obviously, help getting back up into it. So Greg said that he stopped, and he was helping that lady, but Greg is not a big man. And he's trying to assist that lady on getting back into her wheelchair, and he got to noticing all these people up and down the main part there in T-ville, just going on by, going on by. They see what's happening. They're a speck, but they're all just a spectator. They see it, and they don't seem to care. Obviously, a lady that has disabled qualities, who needs help, and they're too busy. They're just going about their business. Now exactly what are they doing at the time? Just driving. Surely driving could stop in order for somebody to maybe stop just in a parking lot or in a driveway just up the way and walk back and see if they could help Greg a little bit. But no, he said they just kept on driving by, one person after another. He didn't name anybody in particular, but I know that he must have seen old Speck. Exactly where did Speck get his ways from? I believe that Speck learned what he was all about here from Luke chapter 10. He decided he would follow in the footsteps of people that Jesus had preached on long ago. Luke chapter 10. Jesus answering said, a certain man. This is Luke 10 beginning at verse 30 if you want to follow along in the text. Luke 10 verse 30. A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho. He fell among thieves. They stripped him of his raiment, and they wounded him, and they departed, and they left him half dead. There was by chance a certain priest that went that way, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Yep, sounds like Speck, doesn't it? Likewise, a Levite, when he was in that place, he looked on him, and he passed by on the other side. Notice it says he looked on him, but then he just passed by. A certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, he came to where he was, but when he saw him, he had compassion on him. He went to him. He bound up his wounds. He poured in oil and wine. He set him on his own beast. He brought him to the inn. He took care of him. And on the tomorrow, when he departed, he took out some money, 2 pence, and he gave it to the host, and he said to him, take care of him, and whatever you spend more, when I come, I will repay you. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor unto him that fell among thieves? And the people responded, and they said, he that showed mercy on him. And Jesus said to them, go and do thou likewise. That's what he said to the fellow. Go and do thou likewise. Not just look on it, not just spectate. Go and do likewise. We see another instance of old spectator when you had the parable of the talents. Jesus must have been thinking about him. He said you had the man that had the 5, man that had the 2, man that had the 1, right? Man that had the 1, what'd he do? He went and he hid it, didn't he? He knew what he had, but he didn't want to do anything with it. Folks, you cannot just spectate. You must find what your talent is good for. How much greater even could the works of the Willette Church of Christ be if we could all join together in doing even more for the Lord? It doesn't mean we need more ministries. It doesn't mean that we need, you name a work and somebody says we don't have enough volunteers for that one, but God has given you a talent. There is something you can do with it, and you'd best get to doing it, otherwise you're in danger of being like Speck. You're in danger of being like the one-talent man. You're in danger of being like the priest and the others who just pass by. I see it, and I'm not going to do anything about it. In what way does your neighbor need help seeing the Lord's way? In what way does somebody who is around you need help, period? In what way does that young person need encouragement? In what way does that older person need to keep the faith? In what way can you contribute toward the work of God's kingdom in addition to being here at the worship service? My friends, what if our missionaries, our preachers, our teachers, our elders, deacons, all of them decided to just be akin to old Speck? You know that wouldn't get the church anywhere. We need active participants in the body of Christ. And I know as sure as I say that I'm expected to be that myself. If there is anything in the coming days that you see that Tim McHenry needs to do different, then I've got a thick hide. You just tell me. Say, if you would, please talk to the elders and y'all coordinate on doing this, that, or the other. I'm sure that they're open to any kind of suggestions as well. And all the deacons and everybody working together, we want to make sure that the church is as active as it needs to be. Because you know what? We don't have to deal with just Speck. We also got to deal with another one in the Tator family. Speck has a brother, an older brother. He's been around a long time. His name is Aggie. Aggie. Y'all know Aggie, don't you? He's always stirring the pot. He's never satisfied with anything. Agitator is somebody that I believe everybody has some kin to in their own bunch and in their own family. Because you have some people that seem bored to death if they are not doing what Aggie's always doing. Agitator can be seen in just every congregation. Agitator can be seen in every kind of Bible place and time and epoch of history that you go to. He was way back when, and he's nowadays. The principle behind Agi and why we need to watch out for him is clearly taught in Romans chapter 16 and verse 17. In Romans 16:17, the Apostle Paul said, I beseech you, brethren, mark them which cause divisions and offenses contrary to the doctrine which you have learned. It says avoid them. You got a man, and he's got a weird idea. Now, I've got some friends, and I'm a weird kind of guy myself, but I mean, they got some weird ideas, even religious ideas. Somebody says, but Tim, you have sat down and worshiped right beside them, and you don't have a problem with it? No. I know they have weird ideas, but guess what? They know they have a weird idea too. They know it's a little out of the mainstream. And the last thing they want to do is to stop studying and start telling everybody, you got to believe like I do just because I've got, kind of a little bit different idea. And I'm going to try to stir the pot and try to get a following after me and try to get everything all messed up. They don't want that. They know that different people have different things they believe in and different ideas, and therefore they are going to keep on studying, and they might share something privately, but they're not going to be like old Agi. They're not going to just stir up trouble just to be stirring. The Bible points out that there were some people that gave the Apostle Paul a whole lot of problem. You see, while he was at Lystra preaching the gospel, we're informed that there came thither some Jews from Antioch and Iconium who persuaded the people, and having stoned Paul, they drew him out of the city and supposed that he was dead, Acts chapter 14. Well, why would they do that? They weren't satisfied, you see, just to run him out of their town. They had to go to another town and get him stoned over there too. That's Agi just pure and through. If Agi had his way, nobody would ever be settled and nobody would ever be happy, because everybody would be stirred up at all times, and nobody would follow after the principle of Romans chapter 12 and verse 18. If it be possible, as much as lies in you, live at peace with all men. You can be at peace with others, but you cannot always be stirring the pot like Agi. Now, if something is unscriptural that is going on, you stir away, my friend. But if something is according to the Bible, just because you may not like it, does not give you the right to do anything that would mess up the good work that's being done. So let's all make sure that we are unlike Agi, Tator, and always like what the Bible describes in Romans 12 and verse 18. As much as lies in you, just be at peace. Because the world is a great place. God has put us here at a good time. God has given us a great congregation. God has given us an incredible work. God has given us a good way to go forward. Let's pursue it and get behind every good work, unlike Agi. All right, now, Agi has a twin. Yep, he's a twin. And I'm afraid this next one, the twin, he's really rough. I don't really know how to say anything more about it without just showing you. I'm talking about Devastator. If you think about Devis for a minute, how are you ever going to build up anything when all he ever wants to do is blow it up? This man's trouble. I mean, he doesn't just stir the pot and then sit back, and like, ooh, look what I did, like it's a game. Devis actually does want things to be torn down. I have never understood the motivation behind a devastator. But he just doesn't like building. I guess he thinks that there's no point in that. Not only does he always want to tear down, but the Bible describes him as someone who likes to bite and devour, Galatians 5 and verse 15. They might do that by sharp words, if you're akin to devastator. He might do that by causing havoc among people. Always there is a crisis. He doesn't care if there's Bible authority for what's going on. It doesn't have his authority. And therefore, as the Diotrephes of the bunch, he is going to follow after some of his other kin, which I'll get to later on. But instead of wishing for and praying for the success of every good work and getting behind it, it'll ruin Devis's day for him to see anything go ahead. No. Let's tear it up. Let's blow it up. I want to talk to you about that for just a moment. I have seen churches do things as a preacher that I have thought to myself, why in the world did we not follow a different course? I have seen churches do things and I've thought, now that'll never fly. Why, that won't be any good at all. And this was my own fault. Every work of the church, we should ask ourselves, is it a scriptural work? And if it's a scriptural work, then even if it's not something you would have done in your wisdom, have you ever thought maybe some other people are wiser than you? And if it's a scriptural work, maybe even if it's not the wisest work, why not get behind it and see if it'll touch at least one soul? And if somebody else thinks it would be good, then who are we to try to blow it up? Let's get behind everything that is a right thing to do. And if it doesn't pan out, that's okay. There's other good works that you can try. I've seen people try any number of things, and it's like, well, that didn't work. Or it worked for a while, but it doesn't work anymore. But instead of somebody blowing it up, it just kind of died of its own weight, It used to work, and it quit working. Let me give you an example. These youngins are going to love this one. We used to get up before school at Culleoka when I was preaching there in southern Middle Tennessee. We'd get up before school, and we met for an early morning devotional. I even forget what we called it right now. Early morning. And we would feed them breakfast, and the school building was nearby, so almost within walking distance of Culleoka. So what we would do is we have a devo there, and then we'd usher them off to school or transport them and get them right on up to the school that they had there. That worked out great, believe it or not. You youngins will get up early for a fantabulous breakfast, and then we'd have a devo, and we'd set them off right and send you on to school. Well, you can guess what happened after doing that for about 3 times. About the 4th time we had it, these youngins decided that bed's warm. I've had that same sausage ball, 3 times already. I've already heard Tim or whoever it is giving the little lesson. I think today I might just kind of go directly on into school. And what happens is whereas before you might have had 25 young people, then you have 20 young people, then you have 15 young people, and you look around last time and it's like, well, we had about 5 of them show up. I guess it's time to stop doing this. We get the idea. It was good while it lasted. If we kept somebody out of doing something bad just one time, it was worth it. But the work has gone through its course. It's over. But there was no reason then for me to look out and say, well, now all you youngins over at church, you're just sorry. You won't get up no more and you won't do it. There was no reason to do that, was there? And so I didn't. It had run its course. It was over. No reason to blow it up. Just let it go its way. If people looked at good works like that, they do good while they're being done, and then when it's over, maybe you can go on to a different good work, then people wouldn't be so depressed and worried all the time. But they get worried about the church doing this and the church doing that, and it isn't what I would like to have done, and so like Devastator, they think you got to blow everything up. Just contribute what you can, pray for it, and whoever's working with it, just hope the best for them. That's all you can do with any work of the church. I've seen some good things begin that way, and I've seen some things that at least started out good end. But they ended on a good note with everybody. Everybody was happy that they had done well for the time they were working with it. So let's try to avoid being like Devastator. There is a guy, he's not against good works, but he doesn't seem to think that any of them are going to work. He doesn't seem to think that any of them are going to pan out at all. He is always lamenting about them. Yes, it's Laman Tator. Now Laman, he just cries and moans, awfulest thing you ever seen. In the Old Testament, you find people like that. In the book of 1 Kings, the Bible describes in chapter 18 how there was a guy like Laman, and his name was Obadiah. He was a servant to King Ahab. And when he found out that Elijah was coming, he was like, oh no, it's awful. What have I done to bring this on me? It's terrible. Oh, woe is me. Just crying and moaning and having the hardest time. People, I understand that there are times in which you need to cry and just get it out. That's fine. But Laman, the problem is he always wants to say, this is why it's awful. This is why it's terrible. This won't work. You know the kind of thing Laman does? Let me tell you about it. Laman's the kind of person that shows up at the hospital to visit somebody. You're not in the hospital. They are. But when you show up, whatever they've got, you've got it too. Y'all ever seen people like that? You show up in the hospital and they're like, what's wrong? They put me in here. I've got a bad infection. You know, I've been having this awful infection for days, been taking medicine like crazy. They're in the hospital, not you. But whatever they've got, you've got it worse. I've seen that kind of thing just constantly. They lament everything. Well, yeah, they tried to do so-and-so, trying to bring some souls to Jesus. Of course, nobody will listen nowadays. Ain't going to work. I don't even know what the use is. Why they keep on doing these gospel meetings. Everybody knows they don't work anymore. They try the same old things, all this stuff and everything. Everybody knows young people ain't worth nothing anymore. You know how it is. They just lament every condition and every societal movement. And they act like it's just terrible. It's not that Laman's a bad person, but he needs a big shot of positivity. He needs to understand that in Jesus Christ we win. There is no scenario where Christianity does not win. And Laman just cries and moans about it, and there's no reason to be that way. In the book of James, in James chapter 2, the Bible says you got some people there that were telling others, depart in peace, be warmed and filled, but you don't give them the things that are needful to the body. He said, what does it profit? Laman is a little bit like Speck, because what he does is he looks at a situation and he says, well, that's awful, you're hurting, aren't you? I wish it wasn't that way. Let's cry together about it, and then I'm going to leave. Well, Laman, instead of crying so much about it, needed to actually identify what the problem was and do something about it. There is a time in which you got to act, and Laman just wants to cry about it. Well, some people, they don't cry about it so long as it's their way. Why? Because they are a dictator. Yep, dictator. Now, you all know he's very much like some of these others. And so I'm not going to go into his in any big way. I'll just simply point out that the Bible clearly warns us about this member of the Tator family. Paul encountered his kind over at Paphos in Acts chapter 13. You have Diotrephes described in the Bible. John described him as one who loves to have the preeminence. It's all good and fine as long as he's in charge of it. If he's not in charge of it, then you've got a problem. 3 John, for example, verse 9. Dictator often manages to get appointed to positions in the church which he was never really qualified for. In direct opposition to Peter's instructions, he will attempt to lord it over God's heritage, 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 3, and will never let anybody forget that he's the one that you need to see if you want to get anything done. I've had a little bit of a problem with the churches in Clay County. Not specific people who argue with me about it, but I look around at all these different congregations and I'm like, brethren, you need some elders. You know why they don't have elders? They're either letting one person do everything, or they don't want elders because you already got some people that are running the show and they were never qualified to be one, and they're not about to let anybody interfere with that. Y'all know what I'm saying? In churches with elders, the biggest thing you got to watch out there for is not to try to encourage, that is, people will not encourage or let others rise up as they can and need to. Maybe that person needs to remain a deacon, but it could be that that deacon has gotten to the point where maybe he needs to be an elder. Some of you deacons, you ever thought about that? Maybe you need to take it to the next level. Maybe it is that somebody who has been a good servant of the Lord now has gotten themselves domestically stable and everything, and they need to serve as a deacon. Maybe that person has got to where the wives of them have gotten them in their home and it's a stable environment and they have fulfilled their qualifications now and they can serve in that capacity. Maybe that person's never taught a Bible class and the person who's taught it for a good long while is not interested in giving it up, but you see somebody else is interested. Maybe you need to move aside and let them teach it, because nobody wants to be kin to old dictator. All right, we've got another one. We got just a few more, folks, and then that's it. You're probably getting tired of this Tator family. I know I am. Dick Tator's got a younger brother. His name is Common. Common Tator. Yep, that's supposed to be a picture of like a bullhorn there. Common Tator. Common Tator has full advice for everybody. He has comments. He's got criticisms. Yeah, he can say some positive things too. But you be assured, Common has something to say about it. Commentator, Paul knew about him, and he wrote to Timothy about him. He said, people like Commentator are ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth, 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 7. They talk about it, and they have something that they think they know about it, but you know, you ask them and their minds might change and they got another comment on it next time. And their comments always seem to be just little side remarks, things that don't really amount to a whole lot. They're full of trivia. They're full of time wasters. And they just keep on talking. Lord gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, didn't He? Preachers are privileged. Y'all just kind of have to sit there and take it. And we're able to get out all that we want to say. But I want what I say to be worthwhile to you. If you ever see me straying from the Word of God, then tell me. Say, Tim, you need to get back online. I will never forget the time I was over at Mount Gilead, and the elders called me in, and they said, Tim, you're preaching slipping. Well, brethren, what do you mean slipping? We had one of the sweetest men, Brother Keith Dyer, that was in the eldership over there at Mount Gilead. And they were meeting with me in there, and Brother Keith looked over at me and he said, Tim, all your lessons are truth. But he said, that last one was not your best sermon. That killed me. He might as well just told me that I'd gotten up there and wasted everybody's time, because he never said anything of a critical nature. His opposite was being common, you know. His statements were grave and brief and very encouraging. And when he told me that, that means, boy, I must have had the awfulest sermon I have ever preached in my life. I was devastated. And I've remembered it to this very day, that every time the least a man can do is get up there and give the Word of God, and something that is more than just commentary, but is something that people actually need to hear for the salvation of their soul. That's why we want to give them the gospel invitation every time. That's why every single time we want to extend our hearts and our prayers for people who are lost and need to come to Jesus Christ, just like you can do this morning if you need to respond. Now you be thinking about that as we go through these last couple here. There is a fella who thinks about it. He studies on it, but just like the passage that I introduced to you just a moment ago, ever learning and never coming to a knowledge of the truth, meditator. Meditator. Medi is studying all the time. I've seen people with incredible libraries of books. I've seen people who are looking into all kinds of different things, but they never actually bring themselves to a decision. Is this what the truth is? You want to see something that will break your heart? Is to get into a Bible study with somebody and they see the truth, and because they don't want to face the truth, they send the study off into this angle. They send it off into that angle. Had a guy one time, he was holding off on being baptized. Why? Well, he had some more questions. Well, what do you got question about? He asked me about dinosaurs. Really? You don't want to be baptized because you're worried about dinosaurs? He wasn't worried about dinosaurs, was he? He wasn't worried about dinosaurs. He was using Medi as an excuse. Now let's think about this. Let's meditate on that. Isn't that puzzling? How could you have had all them dinosaurs roaming the earth? Man, I asked you about your soul. Is your soul all right with Jesus, and you're over here worried about some bones found in the rocks? Let's not worry about that so much. Let's meditate on those things that are good, those things that are right. Because if you don't watch it, you'll end up being just like the very last one in the Tator family we should avoid, Hesitator. Ladies, y'all thought you'd get off? Nope. Hezi. She's not got a very happy look there, does she? She's kind of a little bit worried, I guess. Hezi, She means well. People don't speak bad of Hezi. But you know what? If you wait and wait for so long, then you will always be a hesitator. You'll always be kin to her. Because you say, well, I'll do that tomorrow. I'll get to that someday. But I just don't think I can right now. I have seen people, I've seen them wait until right before they left this old earth. And only the mercy of God, my friend, allowed them to obey the gospel at the 11th hour. And they didn't even know they were going to get an 11th hour. Sometimes we would have 3, 4 young people come to obey the gospel at the same time at Mount Gilead. What happened? Well, there would be in the community somebody that was on the road be an awful accident. 1 or 2 of them died. Classmates that they knew of. And it would shake them up. And that event would cause them to come to the Lord. They didn't want to hesitate any longer. And I appreciated that. We were happy to baptize them into Christ. But I want you to think about this. What about that young person that was in the accident that motivated them? What about that one that didn't make it? They never got their 11th hour conversion. They were waiting. Waiting on what? All your plans to come true? All of them are fulfilled in Jesus Christ, my friend. Waiting on what? Waiting on a better day? There is no better time than this. All has been prepared. Souls are here praying for you. It's time to obey the Lord. Why would you hesitate any longer? That is what those who perish and leave this life unprepared before the Lord do. But for those who know that today is the day of salvation, Jesus Christ implores you, come unto me, all ye that are weary and heavy laden, I will give you rest. Let every soul awake and understand that today is the day. There is no better time than the present. Everybody here will rejoice with you, and the angels in heaven as well. If you just come and obey the gospel, do it to the salvation of your soul. Please think about it, and then act on it as we stand and sing our song.